Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Ashley Craven, and I am the marketing director of Griffin House. And today I am joined by two phenomenal experts in the field, one of which, Andrew Roszak, who has incredible credentials. He's a JD, MPA, EMT-P, and he's also the executive director of the Institute for Childhood Preparedness. Andrew is also the author of a book recently published by Griffin House. It is, in fact, an incomplete series called the Preparing for the Unexpected series, the first book of which just launched this past March, called Preschool Preparedness for an Active Shooter. We're also joined by Ron Roszak, and he is a senior safety advisor for the Institute for Childhood Preparedness. So hello, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
We're going to dive in and talk about preschool health and safety, and essentially just considerations during this national unrest and times of uncertainty right now, given the situation across the world, really. We're all faced with such a strange moment in history. And so I know that a lot of educational professionals have lots of concerns, fears, questions, and we would love to just take this time to address those fears and questions. First, I'd love to kick it off with this question is for you, Andrew. Is it possible to keep your building safe during COVID?
Well, that's certainly a great question. And Ashley, who would have thought when we were planning to launch this series of books a few years ago that preparing for unexpected would somehow become so relevant in the times that we're currently living in. But boy, you couldn't ask for a better series title now, because we certainly are in unprecedented and unexpected times. I think the big thing we need to keep in mind is that, everything that we do as adults is about managing risk. And, whether that's leaving home to go to work or leaving work to go back home for the day, as adults, we're trying to limit our exposure. We're trying to limit our amount of risk. We're trying to make things as safe as we possibly can in this era that we're in. And there's a lot of different challenges. I mean, there's systemic challenges like drug overdoses, like domestic abuse, like substance abuse, all these kind of things that we have going on just on a normal day. But of course, as we see, time after time after time, all of those issues get compounded when there's an emergency or a disaster. And what we have now is unprecedented, because unlike any other disaster, we don't necessarily have a start date and an end date. So we're in this really constant state of flux, and it's very difficult, especially if you're someone who likes to make plans and have, life scheduled out. We know kids are one of those people. They love routines, they love schedules. Routines help them learn and help them grow. So we're kind of in this really unprecedented time where we have coronavirus, and that's an invisible enemy. We're all trying to fight and trying to stay healthy. We don't yet understand all the long-term consequences of coronavirus. We have skyrocketing unemployment rates as businesses were forced to close. We have folks that were already on the cusp of being, insecure in terms of food, that are now really plunged into a deep crisis. So you have a lot of competing factors right now. And I think the biggest, piece of advice that we can have is try to chunk things out, try to take things one day at a time. Nobody has all the answers right now. We're all in this together worldwide. I mean, the whole world is impacted. So, we need to practice a couple of things. And the first off is, again, breaking it down to a manageable area where you take things one day at a time. We have to be very, very flexible right now, because the plans, the decisions, the guidance that we have today is definitely going to be changing next week and next month. So you have to be very, very flexible. You have to find yourself some really reliable sources of information. And I would encourage you not to get that information from social media or memes. I would encourage you to get with experts that know what they're talking about, and really try to keep on top of that as best you can. So I think we can keep our buildings safe. I think it's a new commitment to making sure that we're on top of things, making sure that we're flexible, and at the end of the day, trying to manage this risk as best as we possibly can, given the real limited amount of information that we have on the coronavirus.
I appreciate you explaining that when we say a moment of uncertainty and times of fear, you just cover the gamut of what is on educators' minds when they are going to be entering their school again, knowing the obstacles that they are going to face, not only, that they face on a daily basis, but even more so now, given this big disruption. And I know you have shared previously in another webinar about ways that centers can reopen in light of COVID-19, but can you share some specific steps you can take to keep your building safe?
We have the privilege, right? We go out and we train childcare providers, we train day camps, we train Head Starts, we train K through 12 institutions, even private businesses. So we're just so fortunate to be out and interacting with so many great folks. And a lot of times we'll come in and we'll do a safety or security program or an audit and give you actionable tips, on site. Hey, do this to your program to make it safer, do this to your business to make it safer. And occasionally we'll get some pushback, right? So folks, want to have their places be open and welcoming and ease of access and all that. And we've got kind of a conflicting goals here. Like, obviously we want to have a place that's welcoming and open, but at the same time, we have to be able to protect ourselves against those bad threats that are out there. And unfortunately, there are bad people. And, as we see increases across this country, whether it's Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, all these cities are seeing a major uptick in violence right now. And that does, quite honestly, that is worrisome. That does trouble us a bit. So I think the biggest thing that we can do right now is really look at our building access. And this is something, again, that folks were struggling with before the pandemic. We go out and teach active shooter courses and those kind of things. And we say, you've got to be careful on who you're letting into your building. Well, now with coronavirus, we have essentially the perfect excuse to be limiting people from coming into our building and to be saying, no, we don't want you into our building because of coronavirus, because of safety concerns. That's why you've seen schools and childcares institute new policies and procedures. We're no longer letting parents come and drop kids off and go all the way into our building and go all the way back into the classrooms to drop kids off or pick kids up. And quite honestly, Ashley, this is something we've been advocating for years. And I hope when this coronavirus stuff is all over, this is one of the things that remains in place. Because to keep your program, to keep your business, to keep your school as safe as possible, it all really starts with that access control. And too often, Ron and I have been in city after city in this country where we can just walk in as strangers off the street, walk right into a school, walk right into a childcare, right into a classroom. And now we're really in a spot that we should have never had access to begin with. So I hope we take the opportunity now, in the spirit of coronavirus and limiting infection and limiting, contagious people coming in. I hope we keep that in place so that safety and security continues forward and ultimately makes everybody safer, whether it's coronavirus, active shooters, abductions, whatever. But access control is definitely top of the list when it comes to keeping your program safe during this time.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that makes perfect sense. And like you said, it's not just something that's incredibly useful and critical right now. It's critical at all times. But I think, to your point, it's something now that it's maybe more top of mind. So I appreciate you sharing that. And I think, as these new rules and these new policies are coming out, which are absolutely needed, Ron, question for you. How can you, as an educator or an administrator, how can you prepare yourself for the reactions of family members? It's just a totally different process.
Well, Ashley, I would say that communication is really the key here. And it's always been very much of a focus for us to talk about communication for all emergencies, so much that we even created a specific course for it, for communication during emergencies. But now more than ever, because we're in these times of uncertainty, the guidance are changing, the guidelines change. They really change daily or weekly or whatever. And as Andy mentioned earlier, a lot of people are getting information from the wrong sources. So we don't want our parents hearing like, oh my goodness, did you hear what's going to happen over at the child care center today? We want that to come from us so that they get the real information from us. If they have concerns, we can address it right then and there. If they have questions, we can answer it. And the last thing we want to do is have procedures change, and then the day that the procedures change ends up having chaos at the front door because nobody really communicated what was to be expected. So I think pre-planning for that is very important. We have so many ways to communicate nowadays. It's just not phone trees anymore. It's text messages, it's emails, it's social media, all kinds of ways to get to our parents. So we have to take advantage of that and keep them apprised of what's going on. So we have that going for them so they know what to happen. Also, what I would say is if you can prepare some of this stuff in advance, think about what might happen. What happens if our facility has to close down because of an illness? What if a staff member gets sick? What if a child gets sick? We can prepare some of these correspondences in advance while we have the time and luxury to write out, rewrite it, and have it ready to go. So it's not under a stressful situation like, oh my goodness, this just happened. Now I have to get this out within the next hour or so. And I think another big thing is include your parents in some of your thoughts. I mean, talk to them. What are their concerns? And get their ideas, get their questions, get their ideas. And what I would suggest, and I'm sure Andy would back me up on this 100%, is even incorporate some of these people to be advocates for you. So if you do have that one parent that shows up that like, you know what, I don't care what they say, I'm not wearing the mask when I come in or when I drop my kid off. It might be easier if you have another parent that can help you with that situation rather than just having an administrator or a staff member become the bad guy. So use the parents and their expertise to help you with that. I think that's going to really go a long way. And then other parents can say, hey, wait a minute, I can see your point of view now because you've got a kid there too, just like mine. So use the resources you have, communicate. As Andy said, everything we have to be very flexible with. A lot of things are going to be changing. And the more information we get out, the quicker we do, the better it's going to be for us, especially with our parents.
It's very much about right now during coronavirus, we're being forced to confront these issues, but these are things that we should have at all times. I think phenomenal communication with families, that's something that should always be on an educator's mind. And crisis planning, that's just something that I think, planning for a pandemic wasn't necessarily the top of a lot of educators or administrators' minds, but alas, having crisis plans, I think that's certainly crucial at all times. So thank you for sharing that. And, as it relates to these new changing policies and trying to prepare yourself for the different reactions of family members, are there certain warning signs of when a family member is going to have a bad reaction?
Well, I think the first thing I would look for as a staff is like, if you have that one parent that complains and is argumentative about everything, I would definitely keep an eye on that person to make sure that all this extra stress isn't going to turn that person even more violent or possibly violent than they were, argumentative than they were. So that's certainly something I would think about. Also, I'd watch for the keys, like, if you see an uptick, if any family has a domestic violence issue or a child abuse issue type thing like that, or even if a parent just pushes back a lot on some of the simple procedures, like we mentioned, they're not going to be walking into the school anymore dropping their kids off. If you find somebody that really takes an exceptional disagreement to that, I think you staff should keep an eye on that person and find out like what's going on there. Is this person that they just recently lost their job? Is there some underlying factors that maybe we should know about? And communicate that with your staff. So not just like one or two people know this, but everybody who may be in contact dealing with this person may find out that, whoa, this family's going through a really, really tough time. And we might have had some past issues with them, and they could really boil over. So it's more, once again, situational awareness, being aware of your families, and also communicating it amongst your staff. Because a lot of times, the directors and the managers kind of internalize this stuff, and they really don't share it with the staff members who could be impacted by this first.
As we think about right now, obviously, I think a lot of educators' minds are on the coronavirus and how to best prepare for that, how to react to families in light of that. Should childcare centers be concerned about anything other than COVID-19 right now?
Well, I mean, sadly, hurricanes don't stop, tornadoes don't stop, fires don't stop. So yeah, I've been a little disappointed at some of the states that I've seen that have come out with their waivers and changed their regulations, saying we don't have to do fire drills right now. We've made such great strides in this country on preventing death from fires and really having nice fire codes and doing drills. That stuff's really important. We average about a fire and a half a day on a normal year in an educational setting, whether that's a school, a child care provider, as home, something like that. So coronavirus is here, but hurricanes, earthquakes, tornadoes, floods, those are not going to go away. And we do need to keep being prepared for it. I think one of the things, probably more than ever, we've seen now the reason why preparedness is so important. And I think you'd be hard pressed to find anybody, any organization, I don't care what kind of organization you are, but any organization that says, we were 100% prepared for this pandemic. It's just not going to happen. Nobody was 100% prepared. And certainly all my work at the state and the federal level, the years and years of cuts, the years of reduction, the years of not taking this as seriously as we should, I think are being seen and being felt and unfortunately leading to some tragic results. So as we think about, preparedness moving forward, I hope this is a big wake-up call, why preparedness is important, why we need to fund preparedness, why we need to really make sure we have those plans in place and we test those plans. And by the way, I know a lot of programs right now, whether you're a Head Start program or a K through 12 school, I know that we've got a little bit of extra time. Some places may not be in session, or some places are looking for, continuing education to keep staff current and to keep them educated on topics. What a great time to take a preparedness course, to think about all these other issues when you can do so, without the stress of reopening, without the stress of the kids being there day in and day out. This is really the time for many of those programs to have those deep conversations about what did we do so wrong and how can we fix this for next time, especially right now. And I know we're recording this in July. If this continues to chug along at the pace that we're looking, and now you start mixing in with the normal flu season, it could potentially be really, really bad this fall. And programs that are not preparing for, how are we going to reopen? Are we not going to reopen? What are our thresholds? What are our key indicators to shut things down again? Where are we going to get supplies? What are we going to do with cleaning? What are we going to do with mental health issues? What are we going to do for staffing vacancies or people that just can't come to work because they've got chronic conditions or they've gotten sick or a loved one has gotten sick? These are all very, very serious issues. And I would encourage everybody to take some time right now to think about it, because the last thing you want to be doing is trying to put your plan together in the middle of October or November with, potentially things that are the future being very, very dark. Maybe, let's hope it doesn't get that way. But working in preparedness as we do, we always kind of have to go to that worst place and then just hope that we don't have to confront those issues. So I would say take this opportunity now, talk with your staff about what went well so far, what didn't go so well so far, and then what is our plan forward. I think that would be a really wise use of time while we've got a little bit of breathing room right now.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Andrew, for sharing that. And again, thank you, Ron. Ultimately, right now, it is an incredibly important time for educators and administrators and all early childhood professionals to be completely aware of what's happening and aware of ways that they can prepare themselves in their centers. So thank you so much for joining us today. For those of you in the audience, thank you for joining us. Just a reminder, you can learn more about the Preparing for the Unexpected series at griffinhouse.com and take a look at Andrew Roszak's latest title, Preschool Preparedness for an Active Shooter. So go to griffinhouse.com to learn more. And thank you again so much for joining. Thank you, gentlemen.